is so groovy being here all together. I'm really grateful to Terry and Shirley for instigating this whole thing, and Rachel for carrying it on, Chris for that great show, and Abdul and all the grad students for staying up all night and really helping. Expanding matters in the vibrational field. Ever since I was a kid, a profound source of frustration for me has been the stubborn fact that I can't stick my hand through a wall or walk through the furniture. They taught me at school that all matter was composed of vibrating molecules. In fact, that matter wasn't solid at all, but made of teeny balls vibrating at a rate so rapid we can't see them moving. What looks like a solid mass, like this table, is actually in motion. Everything is moving all the time. Everything. I thought this was fantastic news. If all matter is just vibrating balls, that means that everything is fluid and permeable, every body is mergeable, every structure is porous, we can enter at will. There is no private space or stuff. Everybody can share everything. To my deep disappointment, I learned that my molecules are vibrating at a rate that's incompatible with the vibrations of the wall, that the wall and the rest of the world are as good as solid after all. This vibrating thing didn't actually matter. We are all separate entities, boundaried and alone. There is no through the looking glass. Still, I remained engaged by the matter that the world is made of, and in particular, to the materials that could be sculpture. I was trained in traditional art-making skills, but learned as much about making things by doing jobs, such as construction work and television production, as I did in art school. And at that youthful time, when I said I was experimenting with substances, I meant wax, or salt licks, or brainwaves, or dried flowers. The skills that I was using as a sculptor were not necessarily the ones they taught in art school. Though I did learn plenty about clay and metal casting and plastics fabrication and filmmaking, the most powerful tools I picked up in college were those of self-reflection and analysis. That there existed different styles of thinking and that interpretation wasn't fixed just floored me as an undergraduate. Because at that stage, I mostly wanted to acquire sound, infrangible answers, as do my current students. But honestly, the most compelling experience that was offered to me in school was being plopped down in the middle of the expanding field of art and discourse that had been and was being produced all over the world. We absorbed a huge number of artworks, texts, films, performances, compositions, arguments, departures, and convergences that I had had no exposure to before that time. It blew my mind that the world was so full of art and words and ideas and so full of artists that everything seemed possible. We were largely empowered, not burdened by this overstimulation. Now as teachers, we certainly have good reason to feel overwhelmed by the breadth of information we feel obliged to cover in sculpture and new genres, but I'm actually less worried about what I teach these days and more concerned with how I teach. Revolutionary Brazilian educator Paulo Freire once remarked, quote, "My expertise is in knowing not to be an expert," unquote. He meant that his role in his work consisted not in telling his students what they didn't know, but instead in helping them discover their own expertise and then decide for themselves what they needed to know. To simply provide them with information would, he felt, be patronizing and would create a pattern of dependency. I don't have to teach all skills in depth. Though I do encourage the deep study of skills and am meticulous in craft myself, but some interests must be pursued by the individual off-campus or intra-campus. My principal job is to support the student in becoming her own researcher and self-producer. Most importantly, I feel an obligation to expose students to the diversity of forms and conversations in art, to give them occasion to consider various audiences and the consequences of their choices in different contexts, and to model a language with which they can reflect, respond, and engage in dialogue with those doing serious work in their field. Two areas in which I'm definitely not an expert, but feel compelled to add to the list of tools and concepts in my classes are, one, the practical skills of socially engaged art, that is, how to skillfully engage various publics, such as outlined in Pablo Helguera's book, Education for Socially Engaged Art, and two, the discussion of vital materialism emerging in the social sciences and humanities, which questions our anthropocentric orientation and recognizes that agency exists in both human and non-human forces. I think these new materialist critiques have enormous relevance to sculpture in particular. I'm delighted to discover that we have too many ideas to talk about and too much ground to cover, so that we have to mix our molecules and scatter them about the field. American retailers like the Gap and Banana Republic know that shoppers are agitated by too many choices and are comforted by having just a few items to pick from. These stores narrow the selection for us so that we feel less likely to make a mistake. Let's not do that for our students, but instead confuse them into making their own choices. A Zen koan works for liberating the mind by confounding it. Buddhists and revolutionaries know that the best way to expand a mind is by blowing it.